Hello again. So used are we to the multicultural and multiracial society which we have in Britain that we've come to take some elements of it quite for granted. We assume as a matter of course that British passports are handed out and citizenship granted willy-nilly to all the world and his brother. In the same way, we know that models featured in our advertisements are more often than not of African or Caribbean heritage than they are white British. To some, this seems very right and proper, because we are, after all, a global country, and there's no reason why we should celebrate only the majority ethnic group or to restrict citizenship on the grounds of skin colour. That would surely be an exceedingly old-fashioned, not to say racist, way of conducting ourselves. So prevalent is this point of view that it comes as something of a shock to realise that it is not a perspective shared in sub-Saharan Africa, and that nations there take a more conservative view of such matters. Take the question of advertising. We are used to seeing these days more than half the models in British advertisements being people of African or Caribbean heritage, and we simply take it for granted now. Voiceovers are also increasingly being done by black people too. It shows that we are happy to allow the majority ethnicity to be obscured a little, so that we can all see that this country is made up of many different strands. In Africa, this attitude does not meet with universal approval. In Nigeria last year, a law was passed which established the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, ARCON for short, a statutory body which decides how advertisements will be in that country. There was at one time a lot of American and European influence in the advertising industry, with white people being used to advertise stuff. White people were used as shorthand for affluence and sophistication. It was felt to be wrong, and there were complaints about it. On the 22nd of August last year, this body issued a notice requiring advertisements and marketing communications materials only to use Nigerian models and artists, and the same applied to voiceovers. Since there are almost no white Nigerians, this stopped at a stroke advertisements with white people in them. The effect was to ensure that only black people appeared in advertisements. It was a legal instruction, the result of which meant that white models were forbidden in advertisements in Nigeria, which sounds a little odd to our ears. Or let's think about the question of citizenship. In Britain, anybody of any skin colour can acquire citizenship. We would think it odd if there was a law which said that black people could never become British citizens, wouldn't we? In the West African country of Liberia, things were a little different. Their laws on nationality have a so-called Negro clause, which states bluntly that only black people can be citizens of the country. It's as simple as that. Even if you marry a Liberian and live in the country for 50 years, a white person can never acquire citizenship in Liberia. Ever. I wonder what people would feel about a European country which had a whites-only clause, which meant that a black person could never be a citizen there. It might raise a few eyebrows, I fancy. It does sometimes seem as though there are two entirely different systems operating in Europe and Africa. In Europe, we are terrified of being called racists and so allow anybody at all to become citizens of our countries. Our advertisements feature many people of ethnicities different to the majority. African countries feel no need to do this kind of thing. Instead, they are proud of their ethnicity and they don't wish to see it diluted or erased. It's pretty curious that there is more obsession with keeping ethnicities pure and keeping races uncontaminated in some African countries than there is here in Europe.